Okay, here's a wild thought for you. What if every spiritual force you can think of, good, evil, divine, you name it, all came from the exact same place? Well, a text by an author named Zhu Feng makes this pretty radical claim, arguing it all comes from a single unified source. Let's dive in and see how that could possibly work. You know, we throw these terms around all the time, right? Evil spirits, divine miracles, spirit possession. But have you ever really stopped to ask where they come from? Are they all these separate competing forces in the universe? Or could they just be different flavors of the exact same energy? So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll tackle the main idea, one spirit that shows up in many different forms. Then, to make it all make sense, we'll use a super simple analogy, the sponge in the rain. From there, we'll see how it all boils down to the power of emptiness, how that idea echoes in ancient wisdom, and finally, we'll use this entire framework to explain the spirit world. All right, let's get right into the foundational claim of this text. And just a heads up, this is a concept that might challenge, well, pretty much everything you thought you knew about spirituality. The author's big idea is this: there aren't countless different spirits floating around. There's just one, the one spirit. You can think of it like a single universal vibration, kind of like a cosmic heartbeat of God that's just always there, driving everything from galaxies all the way down to our own hearts. And that's the whole game right there. Good, evil, divine, they aren't actually different types of spirit. They're just different ways that this one universal energy shows up. Of course, that brings up a huge question, right? If the source is the same for everything and everyone, why are the effects so wildly different? To answer that, the author uses this really simple, almost poetic analogy that makes this super abstract idea feel totally real. It all comes down to a sponge and some rain. So, just imagine two objects. You've got a sponge and you've got a solid block of iron. The key thing here isn't what they're made of, but their internal structure. The sponge is all porous, it's open, it's full of empty space. The iron, it's the complete opposite. It's dense, solid, and totally closed off. Now, picture a gentle rain falling everywhere, totally uniform. This rain represents that universal spirit we were talking about. The sponge, with all its empty spaces, just soaks that water right up, easy. But the iron block, the rain just runs right off it. It can't absorb a thing because its structure is just too dense. Same rain, totally different outcomes. So, this is the crucial point. The rain doesn't change. It's constant, it's universal. What matters is the internal structure of the thing it lands on. Porosity leads to absorption. Density leads to repulsion. And believe it or not, that simple idea is the key to this entire theory. Okay, sponges, iron blocks, I get it. But how does any of this relate to human spirituality? Well, this next part is where that connection becomes crystal clear. And here's the leap. For us, that internal structure isn't our physical body. It's the state of our heart and mind, what's captured in the Chinese character xin, or xin. In our own inner world, each of us is either that porous sponge or that dense iron block. This brings us to what you could call the resonance equation. On one hand, you have an empty, open heart. It's not all cluttered with worries or rigid ideas, so it's porous, like the sponge. It can easily resonate with the universal spirit, leading to high spirituality. But a heart that's dense with ego and attachments, that's the iron block. It just repels that spirit, and you end up with a low spiritual connection. Now, what's so fascinating here is that the author isn't claiming this is some brand new idea. Instead, they argue it's an ancient truth, one that's been hiding in plain sight inside one of the most famous Buddhist texts. To back up this whole idea of emptiness being the key, the text points us directly to the Heart Sutra. It argues that this ancient scripture is basically describing the exact same principle as our sponge and rain analogy, just in much more profound language. The whole connection really hinges on one powerful phrase from the sutra, Xin Wu Gua Ai. It basically means the mind has no hindrances or no entanglements. According to the author, this is the perfect description of a mind that's porous and open, just like our sponge. So the logic they present is pretty straightforward. If you have no hindrances, it means your heart is empty. An empty heart can achieve 100% resonance with that universal spirit. And if you're in perfect resonance with something that's eternal, you become one with it. It's a direct path from inner peace to eternal existence. Okay, so we have the full framework now, one universal spirit, and our own inner state determines how we connect to it.
So let's apply this and go back to those mysterious things we talked about at the beginning. So here's how the author redefines everything. An evil spirit isn't some cartoon demon, it's just any vibration, or even any person, that works against that universal frequency. A divine manifestation, that's not some personal vision, it's a huge, impersonal event, like a hurricane, where the universe just reveals its raw power. And spirit possession, that's when an outside will, maybe from a past idea or someone deceased, takes over a person's thinking.
And the author takes this idea of possession a step further in a really provocative way. They suggest that anyone who doesn't think for themselves, who just parrots old ideas or dogma, is, in a sense, possessed by those thoughts. This pretty much frames independent thinking as an act of spiritual freedom.
So, after all of this, the central actionable takeaway from the text is actually incredibly simple. The best way to connect with the universal spirit isn't through complex rituals, it's through one single practice: emptying the heart of all its hindrances so you can allow for that perfect resonance. Which leaves us with a final question to really think about. In a world that is just so full of noise, attachments, and constant information, what would it truly mean and what would it even feel like to have a mind with no hindrances at all?